It began, as most great mysteries do, with an accident, a chance discovery in a place no one expected, at a time when no one was looking. The kind of moment that starts small, almost insignificant, and then grows until it rewrites everything. We thought we knew Dot in the heart of a quiet European countryside, hidden beneath layers of earth and decades of secrecy. A team of workers stumbled upon something strange. They were there for something entirely different, a routine excavation, nothing glamorous, nothing historic, until a fragment of rusted metal caught the light. At first, it looked like debris, just another piece of the past swallowed by time. But as they brushed away the dirt, shapes began to emerge. Sharp, angular, deliberate shapes. Within minutes, it was clear this was no ordinary find. The air grew heavier, charged with the quiet electricity of history waking up. Buried under the soil was the entrance to a tunnel perfectly aligned, reinforced with materials that had no business being here, in this place, in this era. And at the mouth of that tunnel, the soil was packed in a way that suggested not collapse, but concealment. Someone had deliberately hidden it. Rumors began to spread before the first photograph was even taken. Some said it was an old military shelter. Others whispered about black market smuggling routes, Cold War espionage, or worse, a secret so dangerous that governments had buried it for decades. But the truth, as the excavation would reveal, was stranger than fiction. Because this was not just a tunnel. It was an entrance to something far larger, a sprawling underground structure untouched since the days of World War II. A place sealed so completely, so deliberately, that stepping inside felt like crossing a threshold into another time. And here's where the mystery deepens. The structure wasn't on any official maps. No blueprints, no records, no acknowledgement that it had ever existed. It was as if history itself had been edited to erase it. What could be so important or so dangerous that it had to be hidden this completely? As the team prepared to descend, they couldn't have known that what lay beneath would challenge not only their understanding of the war, but of the secret technologies and experiments that may have been decades ahead of their time. The descent entrance yawned open like the mouth of some long-forgotten beast, dark and silent, daring them to step inside. The air that drifted out was cold, unnaturally cold for the season, and carried with it the sharp, metallic tang of rust and something else, something faintly chemical. It was the kind of smell that makes you instinctively want to hold your breath. The team rigged up lights, their beams cutting jagged paths through the darkness. Dust swirled in the air like a living thing, disturbed for the first time in perhaps 80 years. Each footstep echoed, amplifying in the cramped, narrow tunnel until it sounded like there were far more people moving than there actually were. The deeper they went, the more it became clear this was no makeshift shelter. The walls weren't crude stone or hastily assembled timber. They were reinforced concrete, thick enough to withstand direct bombardment. Every 20 meters, heavy steel blast doors blocked their path, each one sealed tight until pried open with industrial tools. It was meticulous, precise, designed for both secrecy and survival. Whoever built this hadn't been improvising. They'd been following a plan, and that plan had been executed with military precision. Then, about 50 meters in, the first strange detail emerged. Along the wall, half buried under crumbling paint, was a series of stenciled markings, numbers, letters, and symbols that didn't match any standard military designation. The letters appeared to be German, but the numbers followed no familiar sequence. They were too random to be storage codes, too deliberate to be graffiti. The team made note of it and moved forward past the third blast door. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The moment their light swept across it, the scale hit them. This wasn't a bunker. This was a facility. The walls were lined with what looked like observation rooms, each with thick glass windows peering into sealed compartments. Some still contained the remains of equipment, rusted metal frames, shattered glass, strange cables and dials whose functions were impossible to guess. And then came the first real jolt. In one of the rooms, preserved beneath a collapsed metal shelf, they found a set of crates. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were objects that looked like precision-engineered components, gears, lenses, and polished metallic spheres. But these weren't weapons, at least not in any recognizable sense. They were too intricate, too advanced. And their designs didn't match anything from the known technology of the 19 for OS. Whispers began among the team. Theories spread quickly, from secret Nazi superweapons to experimental energy devices to the more far-fetched ideas alien reverse engineering, time travel, technology decades ahead of its time. The deeper they went, the more it felt like the structure itself was resisting them, forcing them to fight for every new passage, every sealed door. And all the while, one thought gnawed at the back of everyone's mind: if this place was so important that it had to be hidden this well, then someone, somewhere, might not be happy that it's been found. The first omen, the air in the lower tunnels felt heavier, denser, as though it carried the weight of everything that had happened here decades ago. Even the light seemed to dim unnaturally, swallowed by the darkness that clung to the walls. They moved slowly now, partly because the floor was slick with condensation, but also because something had changed. The sounds of their movement, footsteps, breathing, the occasional scrape of a tool no longer seemed to echo the same way. It was subtle, but it gave the impression that the space around them was absorbing sound. At the far end of the chamber, a narrow stairwell descended into what looked like a sub-basement. The steps were metal, corroded and weak, and groaned under their weight. The deeper they went, the colder it became. One of the team checked the air temperature on a handheld sensor. 5C, then for C. Far too cold for an underground space. With no ventilation, then, without warning, they reached the bottom and froze. Before them was a massive steel door unlike any they had seen so far, nearly a foot thick, with a wheel lock mechanism that looked more like something from a bank vault than a bunker. Across its surface, in flaking black paint, was a single warning word in German: Sperrgebiet, restricted area. But there was something else. Scratched into the paint hastily, violently, as if done in desperation, were 3 words. In shaky handwriting: Nick Fennon. Nemels, do not open. Ever. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the quiet dripping of water from somewhere overhead. Finally, one of the men, a veteran explorer, not easily rattled, stepped forward and brushed the frost from the locking wheel. It was frozen solid. They began debating whether to force it open when a faint metallic clang echoed from behind the door. Everyone stopped talking. It came again, slower this time, like the sound of something shifting in the darkness beyond. One of the younger members laughed nervously, muttering about loose machinery. But the lead investigator noticed something odd. The sound wasn't quite metallic. It was deeper, almost resonant, like a hollow vibration through something vast. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Someone suggested leaving it for last, moving on to other sections first. But the lead archaeologist shook his head. This was the heart of the mystery. If the door was locked this securely, whatever lay beyond was the reason this facility existed. They set to work thawing the mechanism. That was when the power flickered. For just a split second, the entire tunnel lit up, not from their lamps, but from somewhere deep in the complex. A cold, bluish light pulsed faintly, then vanished as the darkness rushed back. And one spoke. The silence now felt different, not empty, but watchful. Breaching the vault, it took nearly an hour of heating, chipping, and forcing the wheel before it finally groaned and turned. The vault door swung open with a slow, grinding reluctance, releasing a gust of air so cold it stung their faces. Beyond was a single, massive chamber. The walls weren't concrete, but lined with thick, black panels, each covered in strange grids and dials. At the center stood a raised platform, and on it, something large draped in a torn canvas sheet. The team hesitated before pulling it back. Underneath was a cylindrical object, sleek and metallic, unlike anything from the bunker above. It looked modern, too modern for a structure abandoned since the war. One of the explorers noticed a cable running from the cylinder into the floor, still faintly warm to the touch. Someone whispered, "How is there still power down here?" Before anyone could answer, the overhead lights flickered, the same cold, bluish glow they'd seen before, only this time it didn't fade. The awakening: at first, the light was steady. Then the panels on the walls began to hum low, at first, like distant machinery waking from decades of slumber. Dust drifted from the ceiling with every vibration. The cylinder in the center released a sharp hiss, as if decompressing. A hairline seam along its surface split open, revealing a faint inner glow that pulsed in slow, deliberate intervals, almost like a heartbeat. The explorers backed away, their camera lenses fogging slightly in the sudden change of temperature. One of them muttered, "It's alive," half joking, half terrified. From deep below the floor, a metallic clunk echoed upward, followed by a faint rumble. The warm cable they touched earlier began to tremble, then a sound, not mechanical, not human, but something in between. A distorted tone that rose and fell in strange, calculated patterns. It was coming from the cylinder. The lead explorer whispered, "That's a signal," and before anyone could react, the heavy vault door behind them began to swing shut on its own. No way out vault door slammed with a deafening finality, the echo bouncing off the cold metal walls. One of the explorers sprinted back, grabbing the wheel and twisting with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. The hum in the room grew louder. The glowing seam on the cylinder widened, releasing a thin plume of vapor that curled toward the ceiling. The strange tone they'd heard earlier shifted, becoming sharper, almost urgent. Their radios crackled to life with static, then snippets of distorted speech in a language none of them recognized. The signal wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the bunker. A sudden jolt shook the floor, sending one of the team to their knees. From the far wall, a section of black panel slid open, revealing a dark passageway. And in that darkness, faint red lights began to blink in pairs, like eyes adjusting to the intruders. One of them whispered, "We're not alone down here." The shapes in the dark, the red lights flickered in the passage, jerking slightly as if mounted on something that was moving. The air grew heavier, dense with the smell of scorched metal and something faintly organic like burnt hair. The team's flashlight beam swept the corridor, but the light seemed to be swallowed by the darkness, barely reaching the blinking points. Then, just for a moment, the glow caught the edge of a surface, smooth, metallic, and jointed like an exoskeleton. Something shifted, making a sound like steel plates sliding over each other. The blinking pairs of red light moved forward in perfect unison, revealing the silhouettes of tall, angular figures. Their limbs were too long, their movements too deliberate to be human. One of the explorers stumbled back, the camera jerking wildly. In the frame, for only a fraction of a second, a face, or what should have been a face, came into view. A flat, featureless plate with faint, pulsating veins of light, the cylinder. In the main chamber pulsed brighter, the strange tone now matching the rhythm of the blinking lights. And then, from somewhere deep within the corridor, came a mechanical voice, calm, deliberate, and the connection the explorers froze. The voice from the corridor repeated their names, each one pronounced with a precision that felt wrong, as if it wasn't spoken, but assembled from recorded fragments of human speech. The figures stepped into the chamber. In the harsh beam of the flashlight, their bodies gleamed like forged titanium, etched with unfamiliar symbols that seemed to shift when stared at too long. But their most unsettling feature wasn't there. Construction, it was the faint hum they carried, identical to the vibration coming from the cylinder. One of the explorers, a linguistics specialist, realized the voice wasn't speaking a language at all, it was imitating them. The tone, the cadence, the pauses, perfectly mimicking the way each person had spoken earlier in the bunker. The cylinder cracked open with a metallic hiss, revealing an interior lined with cables that pulsed like living veins. At its core was a sphere, dark and glossy, with an eerie sense of awareness. The red-eyed figures stopped just short of it, standing guard like ancient sentinels. The voice shifted, now blending all of their tones into one, and delivered a single message. The cycle resumes. Then the vault's light snapped off. The cyclopanic erupted in the pitch-black chamber. Boots scraped against the concrete floor. Breathing grew rapid, and the faint whirring of the red-eyed figure shifted into a deep, resonant rumble. The darkness wasn't empty, it was alive with movement. Someone's flashlight flickered back on for just an instant, catching the sphere at the heart of the cylinder. It was no longer dormant, it was rotating, bands of faint light spiraling across its surface like galaxies being born and destroyed in seconds. Each revolution pulsed through the air, rattling their bones. The bunker walls groaned, dust raining down from the ceiling. The explorers realized the vibration was spreading, traveling deep underground. This wasn't just a machine, it was a signal. One of the team shouted, "It's broadcasting." But before they could react, the sphere's light flared blindingly bright, and the mechanical voice returned. It wasn't imitating them anymore. It spoke in a language none of them recognized, layered with tones too deep for human hearing. The sound made their vision blur, their thoughts fracture. Through the haze, one of the explorers understood not through words, but through a sudden, overwhelming certainty. This place had been sealed to prevent something from waking up. And now, after decades. It was awake. The lights in the corridor flashed once, twice, and then everywhere, far beyond the bunker. Answering lights began to blink in perfect synchrony. The camera hit the ground with a sharp crack, its feed filling with static. In the last frozen frame before it cut out, the red-eyed figure stepped forward, surrounding the team. The screen went black, and then, faintly, a whisper not mechanical, but unmistakably human, the cycle resumes.